in our headlines on this Monday, September 22nd, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung is en route to the US to take part in this year's United Nations General Assembly and to preside over United Nations Security Council open debate on artificial intelligence and international peace. And speaking to the foreign media, President Lee Jae-myung suggests a nuclear weapons freeze for North Korea as an emergency interim measure toward the final goal of denuclearization, while the regime's Kim Jong-un shares fresh disdain for South Korea. Meanwhile, a special group of international musicians are among those seeking to share their take on Korea's Kugak at a global expo currently taking place at the center of the country until October 11th. We start with a preview of President Lee Jae-myung's agenda at the United Nations in New York this week as he partakes in the 80th General Assembly. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yu-jin reports.
South Korea's presidential office says President Lee Jae-myung's trip to New York for this year's United Nations General Assembly will mark his full-fledged debut on the multilateral stage. Lee's first overseas visit after taking office in June was to the G7 summit in Canada, but this time the stage is far bigger, with some 190 heads of state and government expected to attend. While the president has several events lined up during his 5-day trip, two stand out. The first will be his address to the UN General Assembly on Tuesday local time.
Through this address, President Lee will declare South Korea's restoration of democracy, outline his administration's vision for the Korean Peninsula, and share how we can contribute to global peace and prosperity.
Much of the attention will be on Lee's message on North Korea as Seoul continues to extend overtures for dialogue despite Pyongyang remaining hostile. Another major highlight will come on Wednesday when President Lee chairs an open debate at the UN Security Council, the first time for any South Korean leader. This was made possible by the country's rotating presidency of the 15-member body this month. The theme will be artificial intelligence, international peace, and security.
Overall, it enhances South Korea's diplomatic standing and provides an opportunity to advocate for issues important to the country and to the broader international community.
Eyes are also on the bilateral meetings Lee will hold on the sidelines. National Security Advisor Wi Sung-rak said the president is expected to meet with leaders of France, Italy, Uzbekistan, the Czech Republic, and Poland. But the big question is, will there be a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump? Wi said no summit is scheduled, but did not rule out an encounter at the UN headquarters. One expert says even a brief exchange could be significant, as ties between Seoul and Washington face uncertainty due to stalled trade negotiations and the recent detention of Korean workers in Georgia.
It would be good to reaffirm the positive chemistry the two leaders showed at the White House last month. Even if detailed discussions on tariff deals aren't possible, if they can demonstrate some unity, I believe it could have a positive impact on the negotiations that are currently at a standstill.
President Lee will arrive in New York on Monday local time and return home on Friday. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has proposed the possibility of a nuclear weapons production freeze by North Korea ahead of a complete disarmament. The regime's leader, for his part, has shared fresh disdain for South Korea, eliminating prospects of any engagement but leaving the door open to the U.S. Our Park Jun-an has details.
In a bid to ease long-standing tensions on the Korean peninsula, South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung has suggested what he described as a realistic solution to North Korea's nuclear program, emphasizing a freeze on weapons production over immediate denuclearization. Speaking to the BBC ahead of its departure for the U.S. on Monday to chair a UN Security Council meeting, Lee described such a freeze as an interim emergency measure that could halt Pyongyang's annual production of 15 to 20 additional nuclear weapons. He called the plan a feasible, realistic alternative while maintaining the long-term goal of full denuclearization. President Yi said rebuilding trust between South and North Korea is crucial, particularly given the previous Yoon administration's aggressive approach toward Pyongyang, adding that he believes these steps will encourage the North to resume negotiations. In an interview with Reuters on Friday, Yi said he has sought to ease tensions with North Korea, but Pyongyang has rejected Seoul's outreach, leaving him doubtful about the near-term prospects for inter-Korean dialogue.
북한이 대화 자체를, 접촉 자체를 아예 거부하고 있기 때문에 남북 간의 소통, 대화, 협력은 당분간은 어려울 것으로 판단이 됩니다.
However, North Korea has been rejecting approaches from the Yi administration with sharp criticism. In a Supreme People's Assembly address over the weekend, Kim Jong-un clarified that unification is impossible and classified the two Koreas as completely incompatible entities that are two separate states with no need for shared endeavors. Kim emphasized that denuclearization is meaningless for North Korea, which declared itself a nuclear power in 2022, vowing never to give up its nuclear arsenal. Despite the hostility towards Seoul, Kim left the door open for talks with Washington. During the address, Kim recalled personal interactions with U.S. President Donald Trump and suggested dialogue could resume if the U.S. abandons its denuclearization fixation and recognizes North Korea as a nuclear state, paving the way for peaceful coexistence. Park Junan, Arirang News.
Also, President Lee Jae-myung has warned of a potential financial crisis here in South Korea should the U.S. maintain its investment demand without the presence of guardrails. Our correspondent Moon Ji-young explains.
President Lee Jae-myung warned the nation's economy could face a repeat of its 1997 financial meltdown if Seoul accepts Washington's current demands in stalled trade talks without sufficient safeguards. He delivered this stark warning during an interview with Reuters in his office on Friday, ahead of his trip to New York for the UN General Assembly.
통화 스와프가 되지 않는 상태에서 3,500억 달러를 인출해서 지금 미국이 요구하는 방식으로 전액 현금으로 송금 투자해야 되는 상황이라면 대한민국은 다시 IMF를 맞게 됩니다.
This stems from a verbal trade agreement made in July. The deal aimed for the U.S. to lower tariff on South Korean goods in exchange for $350 billion in investment from Seoul. However, disagreements on how this investment would be handled have prevented the final signing. An expert echoed President Yi's concerns regarding the potential impact of such capital outflows.
Take into account the potential impact of the sudden outflow of the cash in terms of the international US dollar. That is a really serious burden for our country's financial status in terms of the international settlement currency reserve.
In fact, South Korea currently holds about $416 billion in foreign exchange reserves. This means that the $350 billion investment deal would account for over 84% of the total reserves, posing a significant challenge to the nation's financial stability. The urgency for a solution lies in the lack of a standing currency swap arrangement. Such arrangements allow countries to exchange their currencies to help stabilize their financial markets in times of crisis. Historically, South Korea and the U.S. have signed these arrangements only twice, during the 2008 global financial crisis and the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. On the other hand, Japan presents a stark contrast. It boasts more than double South Korea's foreign exchange reserves, with a $550 billion investment package accounting for 42% of its total. Crucially, Japan's yen is an international key currency, and it maintains a permanent swap line with the U.S. This provides a robust financial safety net, a luxury South Korea lacks as it does not hold a key currency itself. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
Visa applications that are for the U.S. are poised to become more expensive for foreign travelers and have become very expensive for high-skilled foreign workers. Our Lee Sin-jae has the latest.
The United States is moving to significantly raise visa-related fees, sparking concern among foreign workers, companies, and travelers alike. The fee for the Electronic System for Travel Authorization, or ESTA, which allows short-term visits of up to 90 days under the Visa Waiver Program, will nearly double. The cost will rise from the current $21 to $40 starting September 30th. The move comes as U.S. authorities tighten visa policies more broadly, affecting not only short-term travelers but also international students. The ESTA program was used by many of the 316 South Korean workers detained in a large immigration raid at a Georgia battery plant earlier this month. South Korean companies are urging clearer guidelines for business travel, arguing that lengthy U.S. visa procedures are disrupting projects that benefit the American economy. Last Friday, Washington also announced plans to drastically increase fees for H-1B visas, known as specialty occupation visas. Effective as of Sunday, the visa fee has jumped from $1,000 to $100,000. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said last week that the policy was intended to prioritize jobs for Americans, at one point describing the measure as a $100,000 annual fee. The comment caused panic among tech giants like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google, which rely heavily on foreign talent. Officials later clarified that the fee will be a one-time charge at the initial application stage, not a recurring annual payment. Still, concerns remain. H-1B visas are widely used in IT, medicine, and life sciences, and more than 70% of recipients are Indian nationals. For South Koreans, roughly 2,000 H-1B visas are issued each year. Seoul's foreign ministry says it is reviewing the potential impact of the U.S. changes on Korean workers and companies and will continue communication with Washington. 이승재, Arirang News.
In other news, applications for the second round of consumption coupons are underway starting today until October 31st. Now, this time around, the coupons are available to those within the bottom 90% income bracket based on health insurance contributions. For one-person households, the cutoff is 220,000 won in health insurance contribution, and for four-person households, the sum stands at 510,000 won. Also, high asset individuals with a property tax base of over 1.2 billion won or annual earnings from financial assets exceeding 20 million won are not eligible. Meanwhile, those eligible are receiving 100,000 Korean won or some $72. On the international front, Britain and Canada have become the first G7 nations to recognize a Palestinian state, adding their weight behind a substantial number of UN member states that are seeking to pressure Israel against its intense military operation in Gaza City. Our Park Gonu reports.
4 more countries have joined the list of those recognizing Palestine as a state. They include 2 G7 countries, the UK and Canada, marking the first time such economic powerhouses have taken the step.
We recognized the State of Israel more than 75 years ago as a homeland for the Jewish people. Today, we join over 150 countries who recognize a Palestinian state also.
The Palestinian Authority welcomes such a remark, calling it an important and necessary step to achieve lasting peace. And similar remarks for Palestine's recognition came from Australia and Portugal, also on the eve of the United Nations General Assembly, resulting in at least 151 of the 193 UN member states now recognizing Palestine's status. However, the U.S. called such actions performative, adding that its priorities include the release of hostages. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also strongly rejected the country's move.
For those leaders who recognize a Palestinian state after the horrific massacre on October 7th, you are giving a huge reward to terrorism. And I have another message for you. It will not happen.
while saying he'll fight against the false propaganda and the calls to establish a Palestinian state. He hinted at more messages coming towards the international community. Alongside these moves, countries including France are expected to back a Palestinian state at the UN later this week. But as countries including South Korea have not yet confirmed their status on a Palestinian state, eyes are on now how many more countries will move to recognize Palestine in the coming days. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
Over in Lebanon, 5 people were killed, including 4 Americans, in an Israeli drone strike on Sunday. The Israel Defense Forces confirmed the strike, saying it had targeted an operative of the Hezbollah terror group in a southern Lebanese town, while also acknowledging that several uninvolved civilians were also killed. The Lebanese state-run NNA News reported that a drone had fired 2 missiles at a motorcycle and a nearby car. The motorcyclist was the apparent target of the strike and was killed, but a father and his 3 children in the nearby car were also killed, while their mother was injured and is in critical condition. Also, this past Sunday, on the southernmost coast of the Crimean Peninsula, 3 people were killed and 16 injured. Now, this is according to Russia's defense ministry that claimed a Ukrainian drone had targeted the resort town of Foros, which has no military installations. Crimea was seized and annexed by Russia back in the year 2014. Ukraine has yet to address Russia's allegation. Back on the local front, last Friday we brought you the sights and sounds of a global expo in celebration of traditional music. Well, today my colleague Park Hyo-bin tells us the story of a special group of international musicians who are seeking to share their take on Korea's kugak.
K-pop may have crossed borders, but Korea's traditional music, kugak, is also finding a global voice. On stages where the Daegum and Gyeonggi minyo once stood alone, accordion, African drums, and Mongolian strings now join in. At the center is Soundtrack, an ensemble of foreign musicians breathing new life into kugak. Members come from diverse backgrounds, yet a single curiosity about Korean sound brought them together.
About 10 years ago in Mexico, my Korean teacher played Arirang in class, and that's when I first fell in love with kugak, especially Gyeonggi minyo.
For me, it's not so long time ago because I came to Korea 2 years ago. I wanted to know more about culture and, of course, music. Because I play flute, I was like, there must be a flute in Korea too. And then I started slowly getting to know through Daegum.
After a rigorous audition last April, the group trained for 5 months under master musicians. Their debut came in August on an international stage in Uzbekistan. Soon after, they were invited to the Yeongdong World Traditional Music and Arts Expo in South Korea. For them, kugak is more than performance. It's both an art and a responsibility tied to Korea's cultural roots.
We got chosen out of like how many people? Many people, right? So of course excitement was there, but at the same time, the sense of pretty high responsibility. We are playing Korean traditional music, which is, I think, a very special music.
Rather than simply recreating tradition, they blended kugak with instruments and techniques from their own cultures, creating original arrangements. As one member put it, no matter where an instrument comes from, its purpose is the same: to move people's hearts.
In every country, instruments are the same. They come from the human heart. Wherever you go, traditional instruments carry people's stories.
For these foreign musicians, kugak's power lies not only in its melodies but in its emotions, particularly the concept of han, which means a deep lingering sorrow and resilience that's at the heart of Korean culture.
For me, it's the emotion, the feeling that is coming with kugak. And for us as foreigners, it's of course difficult to say that we understand kugak and the feeling han itself. But I feel trying to understand or getting close to it. I never felt that in my life before when I played the European 전통 음악.
Beyond their music, Soundtrack has a clear mission: to introduce Korean traditional music to a wider global audience and break down the barriers that often confine cultural heritage.
I want to put the boundaries down that all the other foreigners are afraid to touch kugak, like you said. I want to be maybe it's a big word, but kind of an ambassador to show that it's possible. So music is for the world, so I want to show that to everyone.
With every note, soundtrack turns Kugak into a language beyond borders, a living dialogue where tradition meets the world. Park Hyubin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the venue of this year's APEC leaders meeting, Gyeongju, is hosting a number of events to share its cultural heritage as it prepares to welcome global leaders to the annual Multilateral Economic Forum. Our An Sung-jin files this report.
As APEC 2025 Korea approaches, the host city of Gyeongju is filled with cultural events. And the Silla Kings Festival is just one of them. Hosted by Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, the event aims to promote the 1,000-year-old history of the Silla dynasty, which had Gyeongju as its capital. From trying out hanbok to exploring traditional Korean games, local residents and visitors have come to enjoy the vibrant atmosphere.
We got to try out traditional hanbok.
It was a great chance to understand the history of the Silla dynasty.
We happened to just pass by while walking around, but the music made us curious. It's an interesting experience.
The highlight of the festival was an interactive media performance and Silla-style traditional hanbok showcase, providing a glimpse into the Silla dynasty's history and culture. Further building on the success of this event, the city will be hosting a wider range of programs at its historical sites to further promote the city's cultural heritage and APEC 2025 Korea. An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Gyeongju.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Tensions are rising in the Netherlands just over a month ahead of its snap general election as police in The Hague violently clashed with anti-immigration protesters, demanding stricter asylum policies. On Saturday, a protest organized by a right-wing activist drew approximately 1,500 people to The Hague, with demonstrators expressing their dissatisfaction with current asylum policies and calling for tighter immigration control. Protesters threw rocks and bottles, blocked a highway, set a police car on fire, and also attempted to advance towards the Dutch Parliament complex. In response, authorities deployed tear gas and water cannons to disperse the crowd. 2 police officers were injured and around 30 individuals were arrested. Prime Minister Dick Schoof condemned the violence, describing the events as shocking and bizarre. Immigration remains a significant rallying point ahead of the October 29th elections, reflecting growing polarization and frustration in the country. In the Philippines, police and anti-corruption protesters clashed on the streets of the capital Manila on Sunday. Tens of thousands gathered near the presidential palace, demanding accountability for alleged corruption in flood control projects worth over $9.5 billion. Several people were arrested for throwing rocks, bottles, and even firebombs, and dozens of police officers were injured. Similar anti-corruption protests have recently emerged in other parts of Asia, including Nepal, where protests have been led by Gen Z activists. In Indonesia, protests focused on addressing corrupt elites, and in East Timor, citizens demanded transparent governance. In Paris, France, waiters and waitresses dressed in full work attire raced through the capital city on Sunday, carrying trays balanced with a cup of coffee, a croissant, and a glass of water. In the traditional cafe race, a 4-kilometer race revived last year after over a decade-long hiatus. The goal is to finish the race quickly without spilling anything. 1 drop of water or a slight tilt to the tray can result in time penalties. Organizers say the race is a tribute to cafe culture in Paris, meaning both as entertainment and as recognition of the demanding work undertaken by serving staff. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The clear autumn weather continued across the country today. It was chilly in the morning and evening, but the sun shined through the clouds in the middle of the day, and the temperature rose significantly. In particular, the lowest temperature in Taebaek fell to the single digits at 9.9 degrees. However, it moved to 20 degrees during the day with a huge daily temperature range of more than 10 degrees. Starting with Jeju Island and the south coast tomorrow, it will rain across the country on Wednesday. With rain falling, the daytime temperature will stay at 23 degrees in Seoul. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Gyeongju will start off at 18 degrees, Chuncheon at 15 degrees. Daily highs will up to 27 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju and Busan, Jeju 28 degrees. Rain will continue until Thursday all over the country. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.